Our profile screen can create a profile, it can retrieve a profile, but now we need to update an existing profile. And that's going to require a new communication with CloudKit to save an existing record. And it's also going to require a UI update, because right now we're showing create profile. Well, we want to change that button to say update profile. And then we also want to trigger the update profile function, not the create profile function, based on the context of the profile screen. So that's the big picture of what we're going to do in this video. Okay, so first things first, let's build that save function in our CloudKit manager. So utilities, managers, CloudKit manager. Cool. Here we have get user record, get locations, batch save. I'm going to put it under the batch save here. And I do try to logically organize my functions somehow, like all the save stuff near each other, all the fetch stuff. So yeah, some semblance of organization, but we're gonna do it right under the batch save. So we'll do func save, and it takes in a record because we have to pass in a record that we want to save. So that is a CK record. And then of course it has a completion handler, completed at escaping, and gives us back the result. The success case of the result is a CK record, and the failure case is an error, and then we return void. Same old, same old. And like I said, I usually copy and paste this completion thing from another one because typing that out gets tiresome, but hey, I typed it out that time. Okay, so we're gonna take in this record and use the convenience API to save it. And you'll notice we're right above our fetch record, and it's very similar. In fact, we're gonna copy and paste a lot of it, but I do wanna type out the function first. So CK container.default public cloud database .save, right? And you can see it takes in a record, right? You can save zone, save subscription. Of course, we're not messing with that. So make sure you hit the record one. And then the record we're gonna pass in is the record we pass in up here on line 70. So that's just record. And then completion handler, hit return. And again, we'll call this record and error. And like I said, very similar down here to the fetch one. So we're gonna basically copy and paste the body of that. And we won't get into could you make this function generic and all that stuff. We won't get into that. I'm gonna keep these separate. Again, sometimes I just like things being separate and explicit rather than trying to combine everything into one generic. I think that's personal preference and style. I wouldn't argue with you. If you try to make some of these network calls generic, wouldn't argue with that at all. Again, my style, I like the explicitness, the readability to have like separate functions. So again, personal preference thing. But anyway, this is our saving using the convenience API on the public database. Gives us back a record in the success case and error in the failure case. Here we're checking to make sure we got the record with the guardlet. If we don't, we pass in the failure case with the error. If we do get a success case, we pass back the record. So that's just a basic convenience API network call to save in CloudKit. And we're going to be using this function quite a bit for some other stuff. But let's go back to our profile view model. So we have create profile, get profile. So now let's write update profile. So function update profile. Now, here's the thing. If we are updating a profile, we need an existing profile to update. Because you see here, if we were to just create a record from the new data, kind of like create profile record, well, when we create a new record, that's going to give it a new record ID, which is going to be like a completely separate record up on the CloudKit database. So we don't want to be creating a new record every time we update it, right? We want to update the existing one. So how do we get the existing one? Well, when they first come here, right, we run get profile. So once we successfully retrieve a profile, we have it, right? Here's the profile record that we retrieved. So we need this to persist somehow on this CloudKit manager. Okay, so let's create a variable for that. So up top, down here, we'll do below alert item, we'll do var profile record. And that is a CK record, and that will be optional because we won't have it right away. And if it's a new user, like they won't have this. So this is fine being an optional. And we can actually make this private, I believe. I don't think we're grabbing it. We may come back later and delete that, but I'm pretty sure we're not using that outside of this view model. But okay, so now I have something to store my profile record in. So once we successfully retrieve that, let's populate that with the record we get back. So here in get profile, in the success case, the first thing we'll do is say profile record equals record, right? So when we successfully get that back, we have set our profile record up here to hold that. And we should probably do the same thing when we create a profile, right? So the first time we create profile, we get the success case. We're just showing an alert, but we do have access to the record here, right? So I'm going to do let record so we can actually use that. And then same thing here. We'll do profile record equals record. That way, even once they... Naming issues. Fun stuff, right? So I already have something called profile record in the context of create profile. So I have two choices. I can either rename this something like new profile record or created profile record, or I can rename this retrieved profile record or existing profile record. So I think I'm going to do that for clarity. I think I'm going to call this existing profile record. I think that's more clear than like changing all of this. So here we'll do existing profile record. That's good. And then down here, we need to update it to existing profile record. Again, naming is highly subjective. It's very hard. One of the hardest things to do in programming. So if you disagree with that naming, that's fine. Leave comments, suggest other things. It's cool. But that's what I'm going to go with here. And yes, another gotcha. You see, this is returning back an array of records. Because if you remember in our batch save, we save both our profile record and our user record. So this is actually records because it's a array of records. So what we need to do real quick here is a quick for, I'm actually going to delete this line so Xcode stops yelling. For record in records where record dot record type equals, and we'll do record type dot profile, right? Because that's one we want. So let me run that back in case you're not familiar with the where clause. So what I'm doing is I'm iterating through our array of records, which is only 2 of them, and where the record type equals our profile. And if you remember, I'll command click in here just in case you forgot since it's been a while. Remember, we created this record type enum, and profile is our DDG profile. So if I go back, so basically we're getting back a user on CloudKit and a DDG profile. So basically I'm going in here and only acting on our DDG profile that we get back. And now I can say existing profile record equals record, right? Because it's only going to go into this conditional when the record type is equal to DDG profile. So that's how I know I have it. Okay, so now that when we create a record, we're storing that existing profile record. And when we retrieve a record, we're storing that existing profile record because we need to access it down here in this update profile, right? Because we want to update the existing one. That's why we went down that whole path. So the first thing we want to do before we update a profile is just like before. We'll do some copy and pasting here, right? Just like before we create a profile, we want to make sure we have the valid form, right? Remember, all of our stuff is required. Your bio has to be less than 100 characters or less than or equal to 100 characters. So we're going to copy and paste this little check because it's the same thing in update profile. So again, are all of our fields filled out? Cool. Let's move on. The next thing we want to check is this should never happen, but just in case, right, this profile record that we created up here, we got to do the nil check, this existing profile record, just in case it is nil. Again, the reason it should never happen is because we're going to create a context on our profile screen that update profile can only get called when we have successfully retrieved a profile. So you'll see we'll do that in a little bit. So we'll still handle the case. Again, you never know. Your app can get into weird states, but the case we want to handle is guard let profile record equals existing profile record else, and then we'll do alert item equals alert context dot enable. We'll do unable to get profile there. We already had an existing one. And then of course return. So again, is our form valid? Great. Is the existing profile record have some value to it? Which again, it should always have it. So now that we do, and that's a real quick note, sometimes it is okay to crash your app. I would have to really dig into this to see if this is one of those cases because this just came off the top of my head, right? So what I'm trying to say is like if you force unwrap this or put in a fatal error to actually cause a crash, sometimes you actually want to do that. I think a common misconception, especially for newer developers, is like never crash, never. Well, the reason I say sometimes it's okay is that sometimes weird things can happen and your app can get into a state that it should never be in. And rather than trying to gracefully handle the error and continue on, sometimes it is best, believe it or not, to just crash and restart your app because you somehow got into some funky, weird state. And again, when I say this profile record should never be nil in this specific case, I'm not sure if this is a scenario where you would want to crash rather than just handle it gracefully. But again, I just thought of that. I want to let you know there are situations where crashing is okay. But in this case, we're showing the error. Okay, so we know we have our profile record. Sorry about these side rants. I know some people, I've gotten comments like both ways. Some people say, just stick to the task. Other people love the side rants that just come to the top of my head, as I'm talking about it, because it is obviously developer related. Anyway, moving on. So now that we know we have a profile record, we can start populating that with the existing fields. So it's basically this right here, to be honest with you. So without the creating of the new record. So we'll copy that, paste there. Maybe there's some refactoring we can do to clean that up. But essentially what we're doing here is this profile record that we've unwrapped. That profile record, we're going to create, the first name, last name, company name from our fields. That's what this first name, last name, company name is. We're converting it to a CK asset, right? We are basically editing this existing record with the new information. Again, to be very clear, the difference from this function and why we can't just use that is because here we're creating a new record, right? Here, this initializer on CK record, when you create the record type of profile, it creates a whole new ID and it would be a completely separate record up in our database. Again, we want to update an existing record. So that's the big difference here. So now it's time to call our save function that we wrote in CloudKit. So we can do CloudKit manager.shared .save, right? And then the record we want to pass in is profile record, and then hit return here, get our result, and of course, switch off of result here, switch result. Pause for a second to let Xcode yell at me. And real quick, while I'm waiting for Xcode to yell at me, even though they're always pretty quick to do it, here's where we want to show our loading view, right? Because this is right before the network call happens. So go ahead and show the loading view right there. Okay, my switch is exhaustive. Great. Now, in the success case, we're just going to show an alert that says, hey, successfully updated your profile. And then in the failure case, we'll say, unable to update your profile. So let's do that in our alerts here. Scroll down all the way to the bottom of the alerts as we do here. Copy and paste. So we'll say update profile success. I think I barely made it within the tabs. Oh yeah. It's always nerve-wracking. Okay, so in the title of this one, we'll say profile update success, exclamation point, celebration emojis, whatever you want to do. In the text, we'll say your dub grub profile was updated successfully. And then we'll keep it okay, or you can, change the text to like sweet something. I don't know. Do whatever you want. Have some fun with it. Okay, so now we'll copy and paste this for our update profile failure. So static let update profile instead of success. We'll do failure and say profile update failed. Sad face, wah, wah, whatever you want to put in there. We'll just change this back to okay. I don't want to say sweet for that. And we'll just say, we were unable to update your profile at this time, and then /n, please try again later. Okay, now that we have these two alerts, back to the profile view model, and let's use them. But again, updating alerts is a UI update, so let's make sure we're on the main queue. So let's just put the whole switch on the main queue, dispatch queue.main.async, get this whole switch in there, Command X, Command V. Well, let's clean up the spacing. How'd that happen? Okay, so here we're going to do alert item equals alert context dot update profile success. And then we'll just copy and paste this down here for the update profile failure. Cool. One thing we need to do, remember, because I've done this many a times, is we're showing our loading view. Well, here we got to remember to hide the loading view. And again, hiding the loading view is a UI update. So we want to make sure we're on the main thread for that. So that's why I put that in this dispatch.main.async. Okay, do a Command B to get rid of that error. Or we don't like an error. What did I messed up something. Copy and paste. Yes, whatever this code thing is, the placeholder. Weird. I don't know why I didn't take that out. Okay, so let's run through this real quick because our update profile function is done. So the first thing we do, again, make sure we have a good form. Okay, cool. It's a weird edge case, but make sure our profile record isn't nil. You'll see why it's a weird edge case in a second. Okay, cool. We have our profile record that we are persisting up here up top on our CloudKit manager, right? This is what we populate either when we create a profile or retrieve one, from the network. We're persisting it here so we can access it here in this update profile. And then, okay, cool, we got a good profile record. Now that existing profile record, let's update all the properties on. A quick note, you may be thinking, well, what if only one property changed? Why are we sending up all of them? Well, CloudKit is smart enough up on the back end to only update the fields that have changed. So even though we're passing up the whole record, the work being done on the back end is only going to change what was actually changed. And then, we show our loading view before we go ahead and fire off our save. Fire off the save. If the save is successful, hide the loading view, show the profile success alert. If it's a failure, show the alert failure. So the update function is done. Now we need to update our UI in the context of our profile screen so that it knows when to show the update button versus when to show the create button, and then when to call the create profile function, right? Which is, let's get profile, right? When do we call this create profile versus when do we call update profile? So it's pretty simple actually. So let's set a context for our profile screen. So up here, below the imports, above the class, like just kind of outside, I'll tell you why I put it here in a second, but we'll do an enum profile context, and the case will be either create or update. Those are the two cases. Okay, so real quick, something like this, I absolutely put on one line. I mean, it's like 5 words total. So yeah, that's definitely going on one line. Now, again, this is organizational, subjective stuff, personal preference. Anytime I have an enum or something small like this that is only relative to whatever class or struct that I'm in, I like to put it at the top if, big if it's short, right? If this enum was 50 lines long, I'd put it in its own file, or if it was 20 lines long, you know what I mean? Like, I don't like a lot of clutter up here, but little short, simple things like this, I definitely like to put up top, right at the beginning of my class. Personal preference, code organization, do what you like, but that's why I do that. Okay, so now that we have our profile context, here below existing profile record, we need to have a variable, var profile context, right? Because we need to access this from our view so we know what context we're in. So context, and that is a profile context, and we're going to default that to create, right? So our default state is we're creating a profile, and we only shift from creating a profile once we have successfully either created our initial profile or downloaded an existing profile. Then we will switch the context, okay? So that sentence that I just said, let's switch the context when we do that stuff. Okay, so in create profile, again, kind of down here where we did our, we set our existing profile record, we can update our context here, where we do profile context equals dot update, right? We're updating that there. Now, one thing we can actually do is because every time we set our existing profile record, that is when we want to update the context, right? So when we create a record, update the record and then update the context. And then same thing here in get profile, right? We're setting this existing profile equal to the record we got. Well, we also want to update the context here. Well, instead of writing it in 2 places and trying to manage that, we can write a did set on our existing profile record. So basically what this means is anytime existing profile record was set, we can do something. And in that case, we're going to update our profile context. So here I can open up some curly braces and do did set, and then we'll say profile context equals dot update. So now if you're not familiar with did set, essentially what this does is every time existing profile is set, like with a new value, which again in our case is only when we basically get an existing profile, we want to update our profile context to dot update. Okay, so now let's go to our view and update our UI accordingly. So profile view. So what do we want to change here, right? Mainly our button. So let's go down to this DDG button, right? So instead of the title always being create profile, we can use a ternary operator for view model dot profile context. If that equals dot create, cool. When that's true, yes, do create profile. However, when that's false, do update profile, right? That way we're just changing the title of the button. So if you're not familiar with ternary operators, real quick, I would get familiar with them because they're very big in SwiftUI. So how I like to remember it is WTF, not what you're thinking. But so that's what, so the what is a Boolean case essentially, right? Is my profile context equal to create? That's the what. And then the T and the F is the true and the false. So if that is true after the question mark, cool, create profile. And then the F on the WTF is update profile. So again, yeah, you get it. Okay, so now let's do the same thing with our action, right? Because we don't always want to create profile. Again, we'll just copy and paste our conditional here, the what of the ternary operator, paste that there, okay? If that is true, cool, do view model.create profile. If that is false, do view model.update profile. So this ensures that we are only calling update profile when our profile context is in fact .update. And if we go to our profile view model, right, the context only gets updated to .update when we set an existing profile record. And we set an existing profile record basically right after we create the record for the first time. And then here in get profile, once we successfully retrieved it, we set it. And then again, once we set it, we flip the context to update. So that's the big picture of what's going on. So now let's test this and see if it works. And I'm gonna be honest with you. Remember when I said I wasn't gonna go off script again? I went off script a little bit on this video, and this is the first time running it. So fingers crossed, should be fine. But if it blows up in my face, hey, I deserve it because I said I wasn't going to do that anymore. Okay, here we are, moment of truth, fingers crossed. When I hit profile, I should see the loading spinner and we should see the existing profile loaded. And then that should trigger our profile context update. So we should see the button say update profile and not create profile. And then I'll do a little update and we'll check CloudKit. All right, first time's a charm, right? Profile, spinner, Cool. There's our bio, and it does say update profile. Nice. Okay, so instead of somewhat different new bio, that's funny. That's from my rehearsal. That's me somewhat changing my my profile. I will say, I hope this works. Okay, so we'll hit update profile. Got the spinner. Profile update success. Sweet. Okay, it should work. Okay, now let's go to Safari, where I have my new CloudKit dashboard. By the way, if you saw the previous video, this is the first video with the updated CloudKit dashboard design. Again, Apple, you can't be springing this stuff on me mid-course. Anyway, go to your CloudKit database. Make sure you have the right container, right? We're not in beta, we're in the actual dub. So make sure you have that selected. And then here we are in records. I want to public database, not DDG locations. I want to look at DDG profile. Oh, query records. Guess I got to hit the button. And then here we have another profile in here from Jan, by the way. And I guess if you download my source code that I link here and you create a profile, that will happen in my container. That kind of threw me for a loop. I was like, hey, how did somebody get in here? But I talked to Jan and we figured it out. But you can see my profile here with the bio, right? I hope this works. There you go. That is what we just updated. So we are updating successfully back to Xcode and then the simulator. So I want to show you something though, something that can be improved. So here we are on the profile, locations, back to profile. You notice we're pulling in the profile. If I navigate away, navigate back, navigate away, navigate back, we're downloading that profile every time. Now that can be optimized. However, I want to talk about this for a little bit. So I'm fine with this for the scope of this course because here's the edge case that you're solving for, right? By downloading it every time, it is an edge case admittedly, but what if somebody, is running this on an iPad and they update their profile while they have it open on their phone, right? You do want it to be always up to date. Admittedly, that is a pretty, niche edge case. I'll admit that, but that is what pulling it down every time solves for. If they're on a different device and hey, this is for iOS developers, they probably have multiple devices. You're always pulling in the latest one. That's that argument. Now you can go down the rabbit hole of possibly creating a CloudKit subscription to this data. So you're only bringing in the data if there is in fact an update there. That is going down the rabbit hole, and yes, you're getting a better solution, but it does take more time. Wait, that's way beyond the scope of this course. But the reason I'm talking about it is I want to talk about like launching products. This is fine. Like going back in here for like your MVP, you're trying to build the whole app, you're trying to launch, little things like this are fine. And I want to talk about this because going down the rabbit hole on all these little things to try to make your initial launch perfect and all these little optimizations, this is the reason why products don't launch or they're delayed or they take forever to launch. When you're getting a product out there, you have to make these trade-offs or these decisions on like, is this good enough for this version? And like, yes, this little loading thing could be optimized, but you know what? For the MVP or for this version, just to get the product out the door, we can live with that. And again, these are just some of the things you have to think about when you're an indie developer and you have to think about the business side of things, not just the perfect engineering side of things. So again, I thought this was a good example of something I thought developers could easily go down the rabbit hole with. And it's not just this example, right? You can find tons of things in this app or other apps that you could spend tons of time on, but you'd never launch. Like you have to launch. So that's the point of this rant is sometimes you have to let these little things slip because launching is more important. In fact, I did a video all about this topic that showcased like early products and how bad they were. For example, Twitter didn't even get the retweet functionality, which seems very, very, foundational until 3 years after it existed, right? So watch that video if you're interested in creating your own products, because that really drives the point home on like, you got to ship and you can always improve it, right? Software is never finished. Okay, so that wraps up the video on updating the profile. On to the next one.